Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler. My video series I call A Better Human Story. I make some claims, uh, large claims about understanding something that if liberal America had understood and perceived and uh, related to what I saw uh, as I saw this thing rising. I have a record of warning about pointing toward this. Not exact, nothing like Trump. I mean, I never could have imagined anything like Trump. I still can hardly imagine somebody doing all he's done and getting away with it. It's just not the world I thought I lived in. But I foresaw the basic fascistic force that he's taken hold of in a leading position right now. But the force was there before him, and it prepared the way for him. That's another story. But I make the claim that I saw this coming, and I have a lot of people in my life who, when 20 years ago, thought I was being alarmist. 15 years ago, thought I was being harsh. Who subsequently, during the age of Trump, sometime when it was it the people? I guess into the Trump presidency, I started having the mixed gratification of people saying, "Oh, you told us, and from my family culture, being right, is a source of pleasure. But geez, man, who wants to live in an America that's got so much getting damaged of what's best of us? It's anyway. That's one of, and then I make a still bigger claim that this is connected to. I mean, it's all part of one big coherent picture. I make the other claim that I have a way of understanding our situation as humankind, the creature that brought a new kind of life form onto the planet, one that's not selected by natural selection, but out of the creative intelligence of the creature, and creating its own way of life. Well, I say that I can show what our situation is in a way I think is really kind of irresistible, that at least it has so much validity to it that it does put fundamental questions into a wholly different light. Like how should we perceive ourselves? What is our nature? How should we see ourselves? How should we understand why our history has been the way it has? Um, uh, and what are the challenges that we face? And I say that we can see ourselves in this whole human story in an evolutionary perspective that means that our challenge, and any civilization creating creature would uh, face this challenge ultimately, is whether it can get its act together well enough and soon enough to survive on its planet for the long haul, or if it fails to do that, it will destroy itself. So we are at that point in history. I'm thinking of it in terms of like the last 200 years before we either get it together or we obliterate ourselves. Um, we could obliterate ourselves a lot faster, of course. We almost did in 1962. And but putting ourselves, getting our act together is obviously not going to be something that happens overnight. And when you contemplate something like the United States of America electing a Donald Trump president, and then you try to envision how do we get from here to actually doing a very difficult job that we got to do about creating a civilization that doesn't that's well enough ordered that it doesn't blow itself up in a nuclear holocaust. or destroy itself because it had become such a mighty force outside of natural selection's ecosystems that it brings the ecosystems down upon its head. I think that it could help us to see what it is that I'm trying to show. So I make big claims. And it's awkward to make those kinds of big claims. I've resisted going very public with anything like this until recently when I figured, well, I really am in the fourth quarter. So how can I let myself be inhibited by not wanting people to see me? So anyhow, if I were to confront somebody making my kind of claims, I would be dubious. I have had the experience of having at a dinner party, two couples, a much older man, just meeting, telling me about his inventions. And he told about three inventions that were like, put him beyond Thomas Edison. I mean, any one of them would have been a big deal, but all three? And I took him at his word. It was only later that I discovered, I never understood exactly what it said about this guy who was a successful architect and a charming man and a successful man. He was doing something about just spinning these tales about these world-changing, solving our energy problem, solving something about our food problem. It's just great stuff. And I bought it all. And then when I found out that it was all just some kind of Walter Mitty fantasy, whatever you want to call it, my sense of the guy was, well, I lost a lot of respect. I mean, I still liked him, but I didn't like it. And I also am aware that the American ethos is one of the quarterback thanking the lineman for protecting him. When I was 17, I guess, when Muhammad Ali, he wasn't Muhammad Ali yet, he was Cassius Clay, and he won the heavyweight title. I think it was fighting Sonny Liston, I think. And I had heard all of his, bravado. And I wasn't a fan of Muhammad Ali because, American boys got to be humble. So I recognize that value, but I feel that if I got a mission to get it out there, I got to be kind of bold about making some claims because why would anybody take things seriously if it was just put out there? And even, maybe I'm wrong anyhow. It's not as though my putting it out there has already led to people saying, well, I got to check this out. I put it out there and I don't get the feeling that people are checking it out to see whether I actually deliver what I say I'm going to deliver. Answers to some pretty big questions, putting some things in a fundamentally different light, and it all holds water. I don't get the impression that people are going out there to see. But if I think of myself in that situation, particularly when I was younger, I'm not shopping for something that's going to change my whole worldview. Though, actually, that's not quite true. I follow physics and other fields, sort of to see who's going to knock me off my feet. And learning about human evolution has, been what's been learned since I wrote that book 40 couple years ago. It's really pretty enormous, the whole story that DNA has told. It's really, but it doesn't really change anything of mine. I would want, when I was younger, if I heard that there was something that was going to offer me a big way of understanding the human world, I would go for it. You know, that's what I did from the mid-teens to when that idea changed my life in 1970. Um, I studied everybody, but anyway, if I were to hear somebody like me making claims like this, I would want to know, well, is that plausible? I would want to, if the claims were valid, I wouldn't want to miss it. But how likely would that be? And it's a legitimate question because actually what I'm claiming is a low probability, a low frequency kind of a breakthrough. Um, you know, I, I believe in modesty, but I also believe in that idea. And the beginning of that book actually indicates that the size of the transformation of our way of seeing the world, that my idea about the problem of power and social evolution uh, would be comparable to some of the big ideas that, like Copernicus, changing our sense of where the earth is in the big order of things. That's really a change. I don't fully grasp what the implications of it what might have felt like in that time. But I think that they were pretty big for people who had had the earth at the center of the universe. And then I feel like I understand more fully Darwin's idea about uh, the evolution of life on Earth, the process of natural selection, um, the fact that many more than can survive will show up. Um, uh, Only some will survive, and it will not be. There will be a substantial non-random aspect of which ones survive. And boy, a simple, elegant idea like that, and you put that down uh, over the world, and you see, oh my gosh, all these things that people have been understanding in this different kind of a way, like a special creation of Adam out of the dust and Eve out of, all that stuff about, 5 or 6 thousand years ago, the whole dimension of time. Well, that geology did that too, but the idea that if you've got enough time and you've got this process of selection going on generation after generation, the things that can self-replicate, and then non-random versions of those things being the ones that inherit the future because they are better crafted to survive in that world. It answers so many questions. There's a good reason why a fundamentalist Christian would not want to adopt that way of understanding things. I personally, I mean, I'm totally into the evolutionary perspective. I have a good friend who's high, a wonderful Christian, Methodist minister, bishop, who believes in the theory of evolution. I mean, you can't not believe it. And believes in the whole theology and whatever the words are for these dimensions of, Jesus died for our sins and, um, all of that too. And I actually find it, if I believe the one, how wouldn't that make it difficult to believe the other? Anyway, a lot of Christians do, but once you get into 13.8 billion years, this universe has exist, billions and billions of galaxies, time of this planet, 4.5 billion years, life emerging. Apparently it's getting more and more recent, but more than 3.5 billion years ago. The whole process that we can see unfolding and the way it unfolded, the various catastrophes like an asteroid and all that, the various divisions, the way evolution worked, the way it crafted. I think that Darwin's theory is beautiful, it's simple, it's brilliant, and it changes a lot about how we see how we got here, who we are, what we are. But it hasn't changed enough yet. And my life's work has been, I could characterize as extending the evolutionary perspective into understanding the significance of the emergence of civilization. I mean, there are a lot of, I hadn't ever thought of it this way in this context. One of the frustrations that I've had in terms of people not understanding it, even people who had an evolutionary perspective, like E.O. Wilson with his, what's it called? His theory from the 1970s. But basically, it had to do with it had to do with evolution creating what we are now, in a sense. Not noticing the profound discontinuity of the rise of civilization. That seemed to me to be typical. Not noticing that there's a point of discontinuity where things are evolving in this way, and then there's this breakthrough. It's a breakthrough into disorder, which isn't the way the evolution of life creates situations. It creates order. But the emergence of a civilization, a creature that's inventing its own way of life, inevitably introduces disorder. So the evolutionary perspective of Darwin is a beginning of revolutionizing how we understand the world. It's not the end. And in a previous video, I talked about how the religious worldview of our civilization, the Judeo-Christian, I'm not sure if, I could include Islam or not, our civilization, but that the idea of a battle between good and evil, an understanding of the existence of something that you might call a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken. And that being a reasonable description of what has traditionally been understood in a religious context as how evil works, that we could infer in the religious context that evil is an important force in the world. But the secular worldview that abandoned that had no way of capturing that reality. And then I also claim, of course, that I can show that it's a reality, that there is such a coherent force and it plays a major role. So I build on the theory of evolution to emphasize that what we came out of was an ordered system, selected for according to what could perpetuate itself as life on Earth. Gregory Bateson, as a profound thinker of the 50s, 60s, ecologist, he said no creature can win against its environment for long. And the thing about civilization is, it's the first time that out of the system of life on Earth, there emerged something that could make war on its environment. Every other creature is selected for participation in its niche in a synergistic system that perpetuates itself, needing only the input of energy from the sun, and occasionally gets disrupted by things that life doesn't control. But then out of life came civilization, which nothing controlled. There was no human systemic force that could be applied to deal with the disorder. And there was nothing, no naturally evolved biological order, because that's what civilization is the escape from that order. So, in terms of is it credible that these claims might be true? In my heart, I hope that just paying attention, that I make it credible just by showing it uh, in the course of these videos. That my hope would be that it shows something. It's the best I can do in this medium. But I don't feel confident that that if I do have these lightning bolts that show all these different ways that things are going to connected, that people are going to see the landscape. If I heard these, I would ask myself, well, how likely is it? And there I come up a couple against to address it. I don't want to be immodest, but I can, I think, without being ugly, say that if you wanted to design a life, a person, a family, an education, a few other things, to create somebody who might pull that off. I've had every opportunity. If that were my goal, which it became, I could hardly have asked for anything else. My dad was a brilliant thinker. My mom was a great teacher of things like literature and symbols and art and things like that. I had a lot of advantages having them as my parents, and I was encouraged by both of them. In my father, the perfectionist, and my mother, the encourager, to continually work to develop whatever gifts I might have. At first, it looked like I'd be a mathematician. I think I know, my limits there. I've seen mathematical genius, and I don't think even if I had chosen that route, achieve that. But I grew into unquenchable thirst for understanding the meaning of everything that I see in the human world, all the patterns and forces and such. And starting with a real interest in history way back, but by the age of 15, in a sense, trying to create theories of various things and studying everybody, from Aristotle to Machiavelli to Tocqueville, Weber, Freud, and Marx, and all those people, and going off to and getting a college education in the world's number one rated university, or at least it was then, and doing graduate work at three of the world's greatest universities in areas like Committee on Social Thought and Clinical Psychology, the American Studies, and then finally having a program created for me at the University of California at Berkeley to accommodate my writing that. I mean, my parents were always choosing where we were going to live as we moved around, according to what were the best schools. I came from a family that gave me everything I could want if I wanted to develop into a social thinker. And then, as an undergraduate at Harvard, I availed myself. If I look at the courses I selected, I would say I was heading in this direction. And then I did a thesis under two of America's greatest thinkers of that time on tragic drama in Athenian Greece and Elizabethan England, and sociological and psychological meanings of the genre. Questions like basically into social evolutionary theories of various kinds. And then when I was 24, that hit me. And one other thing that, in addition to having every opportunity to develop direction, there's my failure has really enriched what I've created. You know, I had ambitions that didn't get realized. Taking the road less traveled turned out to be more perilous to one's career than I had imagined. That I would have easily been led into a different world, into a different life. I came very close to becoming one of America's people who would help an American president to understand psychologically the leader of another country before they met him. I came very close to having that position. I would have taken it. Uh, I wanted to be a player. Um, Being an interpreter of dynamics of the game was meaningful to me, but I wanted to be in the mix. I got a position at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I had already written a 1,600-page dissertation on that thing. I was ready for the next thing. And I couldn't get that published, by the way. And if Walter Mondale had won in 1984, I had a relationship with someone who was going to be very high up in the State Department and was going to make me his right-hand man. I would have taken that. There are a lot of things I would have done, I think. Now, maybe I would have gotten tired, but I think that the world, by closing off a lot of things, um, you know, everything I ever applied for before I got that big idea, I got. Everything I applied for once I got a really important idea, it was mostly no, not yes, which has been an amazing thing to try to interpret. But anyway, in terms of credentials, I think that if you look at my life and some of the things that were said about the work that I did at various levels and honors and things like that, you would say, well, if somebody was going to come up with um, an, an integrated picture of the human world, it would be this is one of the more likely ways it would look. I mean, this guy was trying to put the pieces together from even before he was out of high school. So, and he had all these opportunities. So, yeah, that's probably. But then I would also, in the position of somebody who is considering how plausible is this, I would ask, why why is he not a more prominent person. I mean, he offered that to the world back in the 70s, and that was published in 84. Uh, you know, when when Darwin came out with his idea, that made an immediate splash, and people, North American people in Europe were wrestling with the Darwinian idea. Well, it was a little bit different with Copernicus, but with Einstein, for sure, he had some revolutionary ideas that, basically supplanted some of the assumptions of Newtonian physics. Well, he was he wasn't 50 years later like Schmuckler with a revolutionary idea. And that is a big question. I'll just say, I have talked about that question on other videos. I'll just say that it's a good question, and the answer isn't, there isn't an idea here that it would have important ramifications and that holds water. I've looked at this for 30 years, since the parable of the tribes made a splash and then disappeared, never refuted, not struggled with, not adopted, just ignored. And I never imagined that that kind of thing could happen. Don't understand how it could happen. I have some ideas, but I do not think that it should be, one should conclude that because I'm a comparative nobody, that these big claims I'm making aren't valid. I keep on going over the thing, and it does hang together. There are a lot of things that are true in this world, but this is a kind of a foundational truth. In addition to all the other stuff that is going on in the world, there are these fundamental, inevitable forces that have been at work that are the result of stepping onto the path of civilization. I hope you'll check it out. And I hope you'll stick with these videos where, rather than presenting my credentials, and that's another thing that makes it awkward. I'm a 20th century guy. My credentials make sense in the world that I perceive. I'm a little confused about what those kinds of credentials mean in today's world. I'm not saying that I know that anything's changed, but I sort of pick it up that the idea of somebody having the skills and craft of formulating good social theory, I don't know if that exists in this world. It did in the world in which I got educated. Does it hold water? How does it comport with the evidence? How does it connect with other ideas? That's what people did back then with thoughts. And I don't know if that's happening in today's world. It is one of the interesting things about getting older, and I'm 78, is that the world changes in all kinds of ways, and it's not always easy to tell just what's happening. And at this level of credentials, like, you look at the people who have millions of podcast followers, and what are they doing? What is it that they are giving people? And what are the effects of what they're giving people on their consciousness? Does it lead to greater understanding of the true nature of our situation? I don't really know the answer to that, but I feel like something's deteriorated in our society. So I don't know whether, if I tell you about, my credentials, that at the age of 21, I wrote something that my dissertation committee thought was worthy of being published about tragic drama and the psychology of it and the sociology. Does it matter that practicing as a theorist of the human world, I was given a summa cum laude as I graduated from Harvard? Does that matter? I don't know. it would it would substantiate my sense that maybe the claims are valid. So I offer what I can offer. I feel awkward in doing it. Um, I'm just talking honestly as best I can in the quest to get in a position to transmit something that might be beneficial for the human future before I kick off this mortal coil. If I don't get it accomplished now, am I going to have to just say, it might have helped, but gee, the same world that let the Republican Party become what it is now and the American presidency be in the hands of Donald Trump is not going to understand the nature of this battle that's at the heart of the human drama as an inevitable result of the step out of our niche where we've evolved biologically and into a whole new stage of the evolution of life where the problem of disorder must be solved.